our topic this morning, Egypt and the Nile. So we're planning to go in November of 2021. The dates are shown there. God willing, we will be able to get there. Just a brief background about Wheel and Anchor for those of you who are new to us. Our whole mission, my whole mission for our community is about bringing travelers together, because when you bring people together who have sort of a like-minded way of exploring the world and experiencing other cultures and traditions, you just have a better time. It's a lot more fun. So we're kind of like a unique little club that way. And you can see all these funny pictures that we have. These are actually all from our last trip to Egypt this past January. And in particular, you can see how much of a sport we all are by having donned the local apparel. We had a very fun night with the Galabias. We had tons of laughs, actually. It was but again, this is the spirit of what we are, is coming together as just like we are all a big happy group of friends and having a great time. And inside of that, my own personal mission for each and every one of our members is to become well-traveled and well-connected. And well-traveled, I know those of you who've been on this before have heard me say it time and time again, it's more than just checking off your bucket list. It is about really gaining a new understanding about what cultures, what other countries, what the people is like, how everything works in other countries, gaining that sort of specific insight and seeing all the highlights and the sightseeing stuff, but that feel that you get when you go to other countries. And part of that comes from being connected to people. And, you know, this is one of my favorite pictures here. This was a part of our group who we went out and had a lovely evening with some Egyptian families while we were there. And they welcomed us into their homes with open arms. We had a marvelous time that night, and sampled some great home cooked food. It was great. And we feel connected. I know that the family that I was with and the other members in my group, I've still got them connected on Facebook. And so I know what they're up to, and you just are a little bit in touch with a part of the world that's otherwise quite foreign to us. And that's really what we're all about. So let me introduce our team today. So first of all, my name is Gordon. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor. I'm joined by my colleague Joel, who's in the background behind the logo, and who provides our technical support, and Paula, our senior trip specialist, who you may have spoken with on the phone if you have called into our office. And last but certainly not least, the most important guy on our call today, I want to introduce Mohammed Yunus from Cairo. Mohammed is an Egyptologist and a fantastic guide, one of the best that I have ever experienced. Welcome, Yunus. Thank you for joining us all the way from Cairo. Yeah, it's great to have you. It's great to see you again and have you be part of our webinar today. And as we look forward to hopefully welcoming a new group of Canadians.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to join this, as that you always do. And it's always great to get to talk to you and to wonderful guests, some of them that I had already a pleasure to meet in our last tour, and maybe newcomers who would like to come to join Egypt as well. So yeah. I'm very excited and I'm very happy to be here to talk to everybody about Egypt, about this wonderful program that you prepared for them.
And Yunus, you said something really nice to us about traveling with Canadians, because I think when we came, we were one of the first exclusively Canadian groups of travelers that you'd encountered, and you deal with tons of tourists every year, yeah? But you said something very nice that you thought about Canadians, and I want you to, do you recall what it is that you said?
Well, I mean, I enjoyed the company, the sense of humor, and the warmth of the people. You know, this is what really also got me, you know, just traveling and getting connected with the people, getting to know people. And I felt that Canadians are also very much interested in knowing different cultures, knowing different, you know, traditions, and very much interested in excellent travelers, I would say, you know, getting to know about the culture, about the history, about everything, you know. They are very open-minded, very easygoing, and you have a great sense of humor. That's what I really enjoyed about this
we,
tour. And
we we did have a lot of laughs, that's for sure. That's for sure. Anyway, I appreciate it. I just wanted everybody to hear that, how special he thought we all were. So we're looking forward to coming back. So our plan for today, obviously, is to take you, our travelers who are sadly stranded at home because you can't go anywhere at the moment, to go on a little adventure on what the beautiful country of Egypt and the Nile Valley is all about. I am going to be your guide, together with Mohammed, who is the real guide locally, and we're going to take a little tour through Egypt and down the Nile. And so, I mean, I think everybody knows what they know about Egypt from high school times or whatever. I mean, and the archaeological history. And for those that live around Toronto, King Tut, as it were, Tutankhamun came to Toronto. I don't know. It was like when I was a kid. It's like 40 years ago. It was on exhibit over there, and it was always this exotic place on the other side of the world. In a few short words, Mohammed, tell us about what Egypt means as you see it through sort of the eyes of the traveler, sort of the significance of Egypt and the history to people that are visiting from everywhere.
Well, I would say that it's one of the earliest civilizations on Earth. One of the earliest. I mean, civilization started in this very same Nile Valley you're looking at in the screen, almost 5,000 BC. There was a civilization who started to grow along the Nile Valley, and they made one of the greatest civilizations. We're talking here about pyramids. We're talking about tombs. We're talking about a whole. You find that all civilization in the ancient times have started by rivers, because rivers will provide a great stability to start with, constant food and water. So that's why they started to work on their belief system and the centralized government. And I can assure everybody that what you will get to see in this Nile Valley would be nothing to be compared with anything else you might have seen anywhere in the world. What we have here is a wonderful country. I would say population now is almost 100 million. We have almost 22 million, which is like almost 1/5 the population living in the city of Cairo, that we're going to start our tour. And it's the largest city in Africa and the Middle East. We have great things to be seen in this country.
Yeah, I can honestly attest to that. Yeah, it really, I think it exceeded all of our expectations. So let's take a quick look of a map of where we're going to go. Our program is going to start, of course, in Cairo, the major city, by far the largest city in Egypt. This program is being offered on its own. So you can come and do just Egypt on the trip that we're about to describe now, or we're going to make a trip to Israel and Jordan beforehand, where we'll spend 2 weeks, and then you can connect from there. This trip will connect right on afterwards. Start in Cairo, where we'll spend the first few nights getting to know this massive city. I mean, I think you have to spend years there to try to really wrap your arms around it, so to speak. But we'll start in Cairo with the pyramids and all that. We'll fly down to Luxor, where we'll join our ship and cruise down the Nile Valley and stop at. We'll go through all of the detailed stops along the way. We'll go to ASWAN, and then we'll turn around and go back downstream to Luxor, and then fly back to Cairo from there. So that's a synopsis of our program. And let's jump into the details. And Yunus is going to give us some great insights about a few of the things that we're going to see along the way. So as I say, the first day we'll arrive in Cairo. And if you're coming, if you're going to join the program for just Egypt, you'll likely come overnight on the Egypt Air flight, which comes from Toronto directly to Cairo with connections from other cities in Canada. Arrives bright and early in the morning, and we'll whisk you off to the hotel, and you'll have a nice day to relax before we embark on our journey. Those that are joining from Israel and Jordan will probably come in a little bit later in the afternoon. And Yunus, and I call Yunus, by the way. His first name is Mohammed, his last name is Yunus, but we had two Mohammeds that were our guides on our last trip. So we had to call them by their last name so we could tell them apart. So I know you can see on your screen that he's got my name underneath him, but he is in fact Mohammed Yunus from Cairo. It's not Gordon Drager. In any event, Yunus, tell us a bit about, just give us a glimpse of what Cairo is all about. I mean, I know I had in my own mind an image of it before I went, but yeah, I'd like to know what you think. You've seen so many travelers, you welcome so many people to the city.
Well, Cairo is actually, as I said, the largest, it's the 10th largest city in the world and the largest city in Africa. Population is almost 22 million. And we're just living on both sides of the river, the east bank of the Nile and the west bank, the governorate of Giza and Cairo. Literally, the history of Cairo starts 5,000 years ago. So I will take you to see things which dates back to 2800 BC. How many cities in the world that you can say, you know, that you can just walk around, you know, just walk around Cairo and finding that wonderful sight on a ring road, you know, and seeing the pyramids just showing out of nowhere. A city which got the largest collection of mosques in the entire world. This is actually like the photo in front of us, you know, two very old mosques, 14th century mosques. Among 870 Islamic monuments that you can see, Coptic churches, you can see everything is happening. Try to imagine it's a very modern city and very ancient. So it's a very, very nice mix, you know, a city which is very unique, you know, nothing to be compared with any other city you might have seen already.
I can say it certainly struck us all as unique. We found the traffic pretty unique too. It can be quite chaotic. But you know, this is part about witnessing cities like this, is that you hear rumors about how bad the traffic is, and then you actually get stuck in a traffic jam, and it's really quite mind-boggling. But I think they also pack a lot more cars onto a lot smaller roads than what we're used to. So it's remarkable how people get around. So as I say, we'll spend 3 nights in Cairo, so as I say, we'll have some time to rest when we arrive. But the next day we're going to jump right in and of course hit the pyramids of Giza as our first stop. And you know, everybody knows about the pyramids, and yet there are so many neat little facts that you know, you sort of don't know, but are just as interesting as you know, the fact that they're one of the 7 wonders of the world. Can you give us a few little tidbits without sort of divulging it all?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, what we're looking at are the 3 great pyramids of the Giza plateau. In total, in Egypt, we have 117 pyramids. So in total, there's 117 pyramids in this country, not just the 3 famous ones that you're looking at. And the Great Pyramid is considered to be the first and the sole surviving wonder from the 7 wonders of the ancient world. All of them are located on a stretch of almost 60 miles on the western desert of Egypt. Somebody and a lot of people, for example, you know, they just wonder why in the Valley of the Kings we went and we seen all the tombs of the kings all in one place. So why all the pyramids are built on a stretch of 60 miles on the western desert of Egypt? Some theorists say that they were trying to replicate the most important stars in the sky, you know, using pyramids on Earth. And for example, the 3 pyramids you're looking at, the 3 stars in the belt of Orion. For building pyramids in the Old Kingdom, more than 30 million tons of stone were used. Try to imagine a civilization living in the Nile Valley as early as 2700 BC, who were able to build such massive monuments just to be tombs for the kings that they served under. And on that day, which is going to be a great day, it will be a pyramid day. Pyramids after pyramids after pyramids. The photo you're looking at are 3 pyramids and 3 other subsidiary pyramids that we're going to visit in the most famous Giza plateau with the most famous Sphinx. So we'll be detouring around those wonderful Sphinxes. Also, we'll be visiting the first stone structure ever in history of mankind, which is the step pyramid at Saqqara. That is also a wonderful site to visit the first pyramids in the country. And later on, we're going to also visit Memphis and Memphis, which is the first capital of Egypt. So it's a full-on day, a lot of sand, a lot of pyramids, a lot of history, things, as I said, dating back almost to 2500 BC.
A lot of sand, a lot of camels. You can't
A
see
lot
the camels.
of
But I know a lot of people, and several of our group actually. I warned them. I said, you can ride that camel if you want to, but at your own risk. So yeah, the pyramids, a great way to start the trip, because this sort of gives the context for so much of the history that we'll see all along throughout the Nile Valley and so on. But I mean, the pyramids are, pardon the pun, the pinnacle of our experience in Egypt. The next day, we're going to devote a good chunk of the day. Well, we're going to see the Grand Egyptian Museum, but what isn't mentioned here is the garbage city and the churches that we're going to see, and this was a real unexpected highlight of our trip. Eunice, you want to just tell us a little bit about, first of all, before we get to the Egyptian Museum, but the garbage city in one of the poorest parts of Cairo.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is actually the area where all the garbage, try to imagine, in Cairo is being collected and recycled. Over there, we'll be literally driving in small vans through the city. It's like the poorest area, more or less slums, people having garbage, everything, they're sorting. They recycle more than 90% of Cairo garbage. Try to imagine, 90% will be recycled from the garbage. So they're doing a great job over there. And we are going to drive through the garbage city, see the people doing all the recycling and the collection, everything. And then we're going to end up in what we call the cave church. In there, there's a it's the largest church in Cairo. It takes about 15,000 people in a big auditorium, and it's carved at the bottom of a hill. It's what we call the cave church. So it's a great time to see, or a great way to see how life is in Cairo. Will be, of course, obviously spending time in the very nice area of Cairo, but also this is a very poor area of Cairo, which will be an eye-opener just to see the contrast of the lifestyle, in the very same city, and also visiting a wonderful complex of churches over there in the garbage city. Over there, people are very friendly. Everybody will be waving, and as I said, it's an eye-opener, I would say, to some. Yeah.
It's a total eye opener, and it's again. I mean, when you think that you're traveling into the poorest parts of the city, and yet it was, I think, for most of our group, I can say it was really a highlight to be able to witness that. The Grand Egyptian Museum, again, we could talk for hours about it, but this is something very, very special. It was due to open this year. One of, if not I think it's the largest archaeological museum in the world, and one of the largest museums of any kind in the world. And Eunice, you said you haven't been able to visit it yet. It was supposed to open this year because of COVID. It's been put off until next year. So if you end up deciding to join us, you're going to be one of the first visitors to the Grand Egyptian Museum. What can we expect, Eunice, in this phenomenal facility that's been built?
I've never been excited, in my life about anything but just to see that museum. That is going to be phenomenal, because it's actually the largest museum it's a state-of-the-art museum. The location of it is perfect because it's overlooking the 3 pyramids at the Giza plateau. The museum itself will house more than 100,000 pieces, and the full collection of King Tut, that all treasures found in his tomb. We're talking about 5,000 pieces. Some of you who've been to Egypt already, been to the city center of Cairo, you've seen the Egyptian Museum over there. And I would say it's an old-fashioned sort of museum, not a very high-tech museum. This one is going to be a state-of-the-art 550,000 square meters of exhibition halls, which would be fully dedicated, to the artifacts. We're doing also conservation room. It's going to be a theater. It's going to be it's a cultural center. Everything will be revolved, and it's going to set, like the role model to other museums to be built, in the near future. We're spending on that museum $1 billion US. And it was supposed, as you said, Gordon, to open this year, but because of COVID, it's nearly finished. It's almost finished right now. But I think they're just waiting after, for the COVID, crisis, to pass a little bit, and then we can just be able to invite. Because try to imagine the opening ceremony for that museum, people and head of states, from all over the world will be invited, to join,
Yeah.
or to see that museum standing. So I'm so looking forward, to see that museum personally. And I'm so looking forward to take also tours, and people, because I would say that museum on its own will just have an incredible boost to tourism. People would just come to see that museum on its own right. This is, for example, almost 20-meter statue of Ramesses II. Try to imagine that we've managed to move right in that. This is made of granite, one piece of granite, which will be the
Car
centerpieces, one of many, which will be in the Egyptian Museum, and the granite
it,
Egypt.
it gives you, I mean, and we saw some of these throughout the trip, and we'll talk about a few more of them, but the sheer scale of these hand carved um, statues, monuments is incredible. Anyway, let's jump on in the interest of time. So we'll have spent a couple of great days in Cairo, and then we'll move on and head back to the airport and continue our journey by flying down to Luxor, where we're going to hop aboard our Nile River cruiser. And this year, or sorry, I should say next year, we're going to be on the Nile Style. She's a ship that was recently completely renovated. And she's a classic. And a lot of what you'll find is that there's a lot of vessels that are floating on the Nile. And from the outside, they look quite similar, but you have quite a bit of difference. And in particular, this ship, like some of her sisters, has a sort of a grand lobby, 2 stories high, and beautiful lounges, dining areas, and so on. It's really a wonderful environment and fantastic service. I know we were so well looked after on our ship this past January. So a great venue from which to float down the Nile and look out at this amazing landscape. I mean, the Nile is like an oasis through the desert. With a sort of vegetation on the sides and the villages and the town, and you see people bathing in the Nile and and it really is a remarkable experience, and this is a terrific ship to be able to witness the whole thing from. So when we arrive in Luxor, we'll basically head right to the ship. We'll have lunch on board. We'll have time to relax, enjoy the environment a little bit. And then we'll actually spend our first night in Luxor, and from here, then the next day visiting the Valley of the Kings. And of course, this is probably, I have to say, it's probably the most significant archaeological excavation site, I think, in the world. I mean, in terms of what you find there. What are a couple of the highlights? Why are they important, Yunus?
Well, to start with, I would like to say that the timing for this tour is perfect, because November is a great time, to come. It's not too hot, which would be great, going sightseeing to those wonderful sites. So we'll be starting the cruise with visiting in the next morning. We are going to arrive the Valley of the Kings, which was a burial ground or site of some of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. This is where the tomb of King Tut was actually discovered by Howard Carter in 1922. And in this valley, in the Valley of the Kings, you'll get to see some of the most amazing carvings and colors. Once you go inside, you will just think, they were just painted yesterday. Those cannot be at 3,500 years old colors. And as I said, huge, some of those tombs in the Valley of the King, they go for 100 meters depth right in the heart of the mountain. So this is what we'll be visiting. This, next morning, the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, and also that wonderful, in the picture here, temple of Queen Hatshepsut, one of the most famous female personalities in the Egyptian history. A very unique temple built on 3 different terraces, approached by 2 rams, as you can see. And you look at the panorama of the mountains there, is just perfect. So yeah, West Bank of Luxor would be the first great introduction, to this wonderful cruise and the sites in the city of Luxor.
Yeah, and truly they are, and we'll probably have a special treat. One of the things that I think people don't realize in the Valley of the Kings is that there's 3 or 4 tombs that sort of all the tourists go to. You know, I know with Eunice, we made a great effort to go early in the morning. We sort of beat the crowds to get into some of these, but there's literally, I don't know, is there 100 other tombs that are there that one can visit at a supplemental fee? Because I guess they just want to limit the number of people that they actually put through these tombs. We visited one that we sort of threw in, and we were almost the only people in this tomb, and it was Ramses V, yeah, wasn't it?
Ramses the fifth and the sixth, yeah, yeah.
Fifth and the sixth, and the colors, it really exceeded even all of the tombs were spectacular in their own right, but there are some things to discover in there that will simply blow your mind. I can't really sort of put it any other way.
Well, actually, Luxor itself, the city itself, was the capital of Egypt for almost 500 years, in really one of the most glorious periods this country had ever seen, from 1500 BC to 1000 BC. So we have everything built there in a monumental scale. You know, the temples, you know, and the sites, and the Valley of the Kings was actually the burial grounds of all the pharaohs who ruled Egypt for those 500 years of history. So yeah, one of the greatest. In the city of Luxor, we have almost 1/6 of the monuments of the ancient world. 1/6. The monuments of the ancient world are in that wonderful city of
just in Luxor. Amazing. Our ship will sail upstream, so there's a nice balance of time between, typically in the mornings, we're visiting sites, then we have time during the middle of the day to just relax aboard the ship as we're sailing. In this case, upstream, we're heading up towards the ASWAN Dam. There's so much great stuff to see. EDFU and this temple of HORUS. And I can remember standing exactly where this picture was taken when we were there. Give us the short story about this amazing temple.
Well, that temple is almost 2,000 years old temple, date back to the Greco-Roman period in Egypt, dedicated to the falcon god Horus. And it's one of the most well-preserved temples we have on the Nile, simply because this temple have been partially silted up, you know, with sand and silt, so it needed to be dug and excavated. And that's why it's in a perfect state of preservation, as you can see on the facade, which is 37 meters in height. Perfect carvings, scenes of all the gods and goddesses, the king smiting his enemies. And as I said, a wonderful experience to visit almost a complete temple to have a better understanding of how the other temples would have looked like.
Exactly. And, you know, there's so many details that we could go into here, but this is one of those examples of those places where the detail of the structure of how it was all built. Anyway, we could talk about it for hours, but that's kind of why you have to go and see it for yourself to understand that it's more than just an old building. It is a remarkable piece of engineering. Our trip continues upstream. We'll make our way to ASWAN, and which will be the point at which we turn around the ship. So the amount of the Nile that we actually sail is limited by the fact that there's the ASWAN Dam in the middle, so you can't navigate between the ASWAN Dam and Lake Nasser. But the ASWAN itself is a fascinating city, not just because of the dam, and the dam has a whole history, but also because of the Philae temple that we'll visit. There's a number of other interesting monuments there. The mausoleum of Aga Khan, which I had no idea was there. We caught a glimpse of it when we went for our felucca ride. The Aswan Dam changed life in Egypt from the time that it was built. I mean, it disrupted hundreds of thousands. What do you say about all that?
Well, Aswan is considered to be the southernmost city on the Nile. And it's one of the most beautiful because there's lots and lots of islands over there. Because in Aswan, this is where the ancient Egyptians got their granite from. So any block of granite you see anywhere in Egypt, it all made its way from the quarries in Aswan. And that's why there is hundreds of small islands that you can see when you're in Aswan. The scenery there is fantastic. So one of the most scenic cities in the city of in the country. And over there, there's this wonderful dam, which was built almost 7 kilometers south of the city of Aswan, the largest dam in the world when it was built. Massive dam, 3.7 kilometers in length, 111 meters in height, and also it created behind it the largest man-made lake in the world, which was named after the president who built it, President Nasser. So that's the name of the lake. A great temple over there dedicated to goddess Isis on an island called Philae, also one of the most. Try to imagine how beautiful that is, and a temple built to the goddess of love and magic on an island right in the middle of the Nile. So as I said, it's a great way to spend time in the city of Aswan, going maybe on a felucca ride or a sailboat ride, around those islands. Also a great place, for birds and wildlife, that you can actually get to see in this beautiful city of Aswan.
And the beautiful thing is we actually spend 2 nights there because, we'll arrive sort of in the afternoon, the evening, we'll spend overnight there, we'll spend the whole next day. And for some, we put in this optional side trip to Abu Simbel. And so, well, Yunus, I'll let you explain Abu Simbel and why it's worth it to make the trip. It is offered as an optional side trip because it involves a round trip flight and so on and so forth. And I think 3/4 of our group went this year, and now I know why.
So actually, if this temple was, founded earlier, it was actually discovered, the temple itself in 1823. It would have been the eighth wonder of the seventh, because that is a temple which is carved into a mountain, 65-meter mountain, and they decided to carve into it the whole temple. So the whole 4 statues you see in front of you, each one of those, they look small in the photo, but they are 21 meters in height. That entrance behind is 7 meters. The temple itself goes for 67 meters, right in the heart of the mountain. All the side pillars, the statues, the columns inside, all one piece of stone, mountain. And they carved the facade of the temple, and not just one temple, but actually 2 over there, to one of the most famous pharaohs of ancient Egypt, one of the most active builders in the ancient world. His name is Ramesses II. So as I said, it's a great temple, a one of a kind, temple in the country of Egypt.
It's one of a kind. It's bizarre, and the whole experience. I mean, you get on a plane in Aswan, and you fly across nothing, desert, and you fly across Lake Nasser, which gives you a bird's eye view of how massive this lake is, and it has stunning coastline. I mean, it's just like it looks like it should be a beach resort, except that it goes on forever, and there's literally nobody on this massive lake. You end up here in Abu Simbel, and it's a small town close to the border of Sudan. There's nothing there. I mean, I should say nothing, but with respect to the few people that live there. And then there's Abu Simbel, this incredible temple, which, as Yunus said, was entirely relocated from the lower banks of the Nile, which otherwise it would have been flooded by Lake Nasser when they built the dam.
Yeah, that's actually saving this temple, because this is one of the temples which have been saved by the UNESCO during the building of the High Dam of Aswan, which flooded the original site where this temple was constructed. So again, it was a big problem trying to find a way to save this temple. Try to imagine saving a temple built at the bottom of a mountain. And that temple was cut to 1,024 blocks of stones, each one weighing 20 to 30 tons each. And it had been reconstructed, the whole thing, once again on a much higher level in a safer ground. So this is also an incredible engineering work, done by the 60s, to save that temple from, because otherwise this temple and that amazing, wonderful site, would have been lost if, the UNESCO didn't save it like this. Yeah. By the 60s of this year.
Remarkable, worth the trip. We go back to, we fly back to Aswan. We have another night there. We'll visit the market again, I'm sure. We had a grand time visiting the market in Aswan. Then we'll set sail back downstream, so heading back towards Cairo and stopping in at Ombo. And what I remember about these temples here, and this is where we got to see really up close the detail that went into these carvings and how they were actually created. Give us a little insight into that about, because you see it in National Geographic magazine, you think, oh, those are beautiful pictures and really cool. They were made a couple of thousand years ago. But the way that what it took them to create these is
a lot of talent. I would say that they perfected on the course of thousands of years, and during this Greco-Roman period where this wonderful wall was carved. We're talking here about a relief which is coming out from the stone. This is not a relief carved into the stone like what we call the sunken relief, which is the best kind of relief you can ever get on a wall, on a limestone or a sandstone wall. So the carvings and the temple of Komombo actually are very special because most of them are executed in this wonderful bas relief, doing all the finer details. And, it's just like a 3D. If you look at that, you can spend 5-10 minutes just looking at details and being not able to understand even how they manage the talent they must have had, because with this kind of bas relief, once you break something, you can't super glue it back. You just so you have to
that's the whole point. No room for error, and there's rooms full of these things. It's
temple,
yeah, well, exactly, a whole temple. We continue once again. And by the way, while we're on board ship, so it's not just visiting temples and then you go out and you come back and you hang around. I mean, they do some great activities on board ship. We had the Galabia night. You saw the picture of all of our group that were dressed up in the Galabian outfits. We had belly dancers. We had a whirling dervish. We had really, they do a great job to make our experience on board, to give us a bit of a flair for sort of, Egyptian entertainment as it were. And yeah, we just had a grand time. There was never a dull moment, and at the same time, the pace was nice and relaxing. Our ship will end up back at Luxor, where we started the voyage, and there are two very, very important temples right in Luxor. And so you would think by now, after having spent a week aboard a ship, that you'd be done with all the temples. But I can tell you, and it's largely thanks to the incredible storytelling of Yunus and the other guide we had, Anwar, that weaves the whole story together. So Karnak Temple, Luxor Temple. There's two temples. Why would you see them both?
Well, I know that we have in Egypt so many temples, but I can assure everybody that each temple got its own magic and own story and own beauty in its own right. Everyone is different. There's so many different stories, that we can spend days going around a single temple, being able to talk about, take every aspect of it. So that's why we as Egyptologists, me and my very good colleague, Anwar, we talk about the most important things which you cannot, you see in this, like a temple like the one we are looking at right now. This is Luxor Temple. You can't see an avenue of sphinxes anywhere else, but in front of that temple. So we talk about the avenue of sphinxes over there. We talk about the obelisks. You talk about the statues. So as I said, each temple got its own stories and own charm in its own right. And they are not the same at all. It's different stories, different scenes, different, things to take in, in every
different scales of size and dimension and everything else. Helen, one of our members who joined our webinar today, she was with us, and her comment here: the Karnak and Luxor temple is the best for last. Definitely I would, get bored touring ruin after ruin and temple after temple in many other places in the world. But on this trip, it really is different. Every single stop along the way is remarkable. There's a story to it. And, as I said to my friends back home when we came back, it's like all that stuff we learned in school about, the pharaohs and these gods and all the rest of this stuff, it just all of a sudden made sense, because you could you could visualize, you know, what was realized during this era. And again, thanks to the great storytelling by Eunice. So we'll wrap up the whole trip in Luxor. Perhaps we'll make a stop for a cocktail at the wonderful Winter Palace Hotel, which is what our group did. We made a little impromptu visit to this beautiful hotel on the banks of the Nile. So, you know, one of many little sort of treats that we enjoyed along the way. We fly back to Cairo for our last night in Egypt, and we're going to go and see the Sound and Light show this time. And I know Helen and anyone else that joined us last year be like, we didn't get to see it this last time. This time we're going to make sure we get good seats, and we're going to watch as they illuminate the Great Pyramids at Giza by a laser and light show and music. And it will be a amazing end, I think, to our trip through Egypt, and we'll have seen stuff that will. Yeah, well, you know, there is no other place like it, as Eunice said from the outset. And so from here, after our last night, we'll head back home and take our flights back. And just going to give you a few details here, and just for laughs, a couple of our members aboard the infamous camels. And I say infamous on purpose because they're camels and they're quite unpredictable. Luckily, we had no injuries, but and those that took the camels, as you can see here, enjoyed themselves thoroughly as we toured around the pyramids. So this program, as I say, just to give you a few logistical details, is happening in November of next year. Our main deck cabins will start at about 4,600 Canadian dollars and upper deck at 51. Everything in Canadian dollars, of course. So it's good value to travel to Egypt compared to a lot of other places. What we include is, like with most of our trips, pretty much everything. The details, of course, you can find in our brochure, so I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but most of your meals, all of them aboard the ship, incredible guiding, and the great hospitality is all part of the program. The only things that are extra, basically airfare, insurance, and the optional trip down to Abu Simbel. Again, all the details you can find in our brochure. Getting over there is actually relatively easy. You can fly, if you're coming for just the Egypt program, Egypt Air flies right in. And I must say, I had my own apprehensions about Egypt Air, but I took it on this last trip in January, and I'll tell you, it was excellent. New aircraft, great service. I would put it on par with Air Canada. So an excellent airline. It makes it very easy to get to Egypt. Of course, if you're joining us for Israel and Jordan as well, you'll probably connect in Europe. But the good thing is, it's no problem to get there and come back. So yeah, 3 reasons why this should be your next trip to Egypt. I would say, you know, reason number 1 is the realization of all of that knowledge that you sort of had, you read, you picked up, but being able to live and breathe it is for me the first reason to go to Egypt. Second of all, the incredible hospitality of the Egyptians, and once again, I'm sure that any one of our members on our trip would testify to the warmth that we were shown all along the way in all the places that we visited. And the third reason to go, well, because you'll be one of the first people to visit the Grand Egyptian Museum. And I think that will be an honor of itself. Imagine you were like one of the first people to tour the Louvre in France or the Prado Museum in Madrid, right? I mean, this is a great opportunity. And so I think that, you know, those reasons alone would make the trip very worthwhile. Just before we get to our question and answer session, and I'd love to hear some questions about this trip. We're going to be talking about Israel and Jordan in our next webinar on the 27th of October at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So please join us for that. The 2 trips are back to back. Actually, it'll be first Israel and Jordan, followed by Egypt. And so if you want to find out more about that, please join us for that program. and Paula will send out the link. So if you look in your chat box, you can find the link to register for that if you want to do that. And in the meantime, yeah, if you have any questions, you can obviously contact us, because I know some people are a bit shy about even putting their questions on here. So we're always available. I love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you think about this program and whatever it is that you'd like to know about it. In the meantime, I saw a question here. Let me see. I just got to scroll back for a second. So Judy asked a question about how many people aboard the ship, and is it just our group? So no, it's not just our group, Judy. The ship has roughly about 70 cabins. Eunice, is that about right for the, do you recall offhand? I think it is 70 cabins for the Nile style, or thereabouts. So the total capacity. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's 60.
60.
It's hardly never full, you know, but I mean, it can hold the boat itself up to 120 passengers, I would reckon.
Yeah, exactly.
120,
so
60 cabins would be on board more or less, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think it's a good point.
So yeah, so
hardly ever. Yeah, the ships are hardly ever totally full. In our case, we had the ship almost to ourselves for the first few nights, and then some other people joined us in ASWAN for the return trip. So there's lots of room. You don't have to worry. And I'm sure, again, depending on the situation with the pandemic, precautions will be taken, social distancing. So there's a very good chance that only a portion of the ship will be occupied, and we'll know more about that, of course, closer to the date. Then I see here a question about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hotels here.
Sorry.
No, but I mean, for the time, they are working 50%. You know, all the hotels and everything now. So even the groups, you know, we cannot have groups in, you know, more than 20, you know, for a single night. So basically, but of course things would change, you know. I would say, you know, by the end, you know, of next year, you know, I think things would be, you know, yeah. But also I would like to add that being on the cruise, okay, this gets everybody together, because I know that most of the women, and I know those who have traveled with you before, they know each other. But for the newcomer, this is a great way to get to know everybody, because you're having basically 3 meals a day together. You are doing sightseeing. You are spending time on the, you know, one of the highlights of this tour is just sitting on the top deck and watching life goes by, watching this Nile Valley, watching the Egyptians, with everybody waving. Yeah. Some of the scenes you get to see on the river, you know, it's like going back in time. Literally, you know, they look so biblical. You know, you see, you know, like cattle and children running and, you know, waving. And as I said, you know, a great way to get to know each other. Because if you're staying in a hotel in Cairo, basically everyone is doing his own thing, going to, but on the boat everybody is doing the same thing at the same time, which is a great, you know, plus, you know, to this tour.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the important point to that is that our groups anyway are generally not more than about 20. This year we had 2 groups in one, because we had so much demand from our trip. But generally, yeah, we're in a small group amongst others. And obviously, should it be necessary, I'm sure any precautions will be taken, depending on what the status of things are like. Just I want to address a couple other questions here. What's the weather like in November? It was asked by Tim. Eunice, I take it it's going to be a little warmer in November than it was in January.
Yeah, well, we had some rough nights, you know.
We had some cool weather in January. None of us would have thought, myself included, that it could be as chilly as it was in Egypt, but it was
chilly. I would say. A bit chilly, yeah. But definitely one of the best parts to come on the Nile is in November, because it's just the end. I mean, summer normally ends in August, so you have this, like, you know, so temperature, I would say, will be perfect 20 degrees. You
Perfect.
Know, and it's, I can guarantee when we go to Luxor, it's always sunshine.
Yeah.
So it's perfect time, to go sightseeing, you go around the temples and this, because most of the temples inside they are outdoors. So you're spending time outdoors in perfect temperature, perfect timing to be on the top deck, while we are cruising. I would say a little bit windy or chilly, but it's not cold. There's no cold factor, in November
And
at all. You can still come in
yeah.
t-shirts,
Tim, part of the reason we chose November, there was two reasons. One is November is a lousy time in Canada, so it's a great time to get away. But also because even though this past January it was one of the coldest Januaries that they've experienced in Egypt ever, and we can attest to that because it was chilly. It was darn chilly a few days. But I just thought, okay, let's go with an abundance of caution and avoid the end of January, just so we're not so that we have a little bit more warmth. So that's part of the reason for that. Dave asked a question: how long is the Israel-Jordan trip plus this? So the Israel-Jordan trip is 2 weeks, and this trip is 10 days. So if you did all together the whole program, it works out to about 25 days, start to finish, which is roughly the same as the program we did this year. And it was so much to see, and it was such a enriching experience that the time just passed too quickly, I think. So yeah, 10 days for this and 2 weeks for Israel and Jordan. And let's see, one last question here from Gwen about how safe is it in Egypt? Yes, okay. I knew this question was going to come up about safety. And the bottom line for me, Eunice will elaborate a bit, is I think it all surprised us how safe Egypt actually was. We didn't feel, I think there was at any time about any issue of security. Even if there was one, we wouldn't have known about it. It didn't feel bad. Tell us about security in Egypt.
Well, Egypt is look at the nature. You have to look to the nature of the people. People and Egyptians are very hospitable by nature. This is their nature. They love talking to foreigners and to tourists. And as I said, the I mean, we went in the store to the poorest part of the city. You cannot find a poorer area. And everyone there is just waving and as I said, cruising down the Nile, everyone is just waving. Driving in a coach, everyone is waving and smiling. So Egypt is a very safe, country to travel to. Egypt is very prosperous. Right now, Egypt is very, politically very stable. With President Sisi doing great things. To discuss. Egypt is changing a lot. We had a hiccup, with the revolution, and which is 2010. But now everything is perfectly back to normal. If this COVID-19, didn't happen, this had been the busiest season since decades, for tourism, in this period of time and in 2021. So, as I said, we had full bookings for the whole of 2021. If not the COVID, happening. So, as I said, we are absolutely ready and safe to have um, travelers, coming from all over the world, to visit our country.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that closing note. I don't see any other questions. I appreciate your time, Eunice, and giving us a wonderful insight into Egypt, just as you did for us. I can't guarantee, but I can almost guarantee that Eunice will be with us again when we come back to Egypt next November. He was beloved by all of our members, and it's really a testament to his country. So thank you so much for your time this morning. And for giving us a little insight into Egypt. Thank you all for joining us. Yeah, please do let us have your comments, your feedback. If you haven't thought about traveling here, then give it some serious consideration, and before too long, I'm sure we'll be back to traveling. So have yourselves a wonderful week. And I look forward to catching up with you all again on the next webinar or one of the next in our Travel Forum series. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy.